If I don't go to my rage with either parents because when I do start, it's so hateful, I'm scared to feel that bad.
Mm. Yeah, most of you have, I feel most of you have a severe problem with experiencing an overwhelming emotion of any kind, like rage included. Right, but rage, shame, sadness, fear, terror. Most of you have a cut-off limit, is what I'd call it. You know, like a speedometer limiter. You know, like so. Imagine you know, it's like a cruise control. You get to a certain point. Beyond that, it feels a bit too much. So you put it back to, you set it at a certain point, and you don't go beyond that with any of your emotions. And unfortunately, if without going beyond that, you won't get to the depth of what's going on. So that's a choice, though.
Yeah. So because I see hate, so I judge it so badly. I mean, it is awful. I mean, you know, my question is hate like the most negative, rageful emotion you can experience? You're trying to quantify or qualify an emotion, which is actually the reason why you judge it, rather than just experience it. If it's in you, why not just choose to experience it without harming anybody with it? Yeah, okay.
Why do you need to know how destructive it is? You already know, don't you, how destructive it is? Like, why do you need to go ahead and even judge it further? Like, to me, it's almost like saying to myself, before I begin to feel the emotion, I say, that emotion's so bad, that emotion means I'm so bad that I can't let myself feel it. Yeah, it led to another question that I had. Can I just stop the other question first? I want to say a bit more, though, on that subject. What I notice a lot happening is that there is this association, and isn't it interesting how many times now we're coming up with how we associate certain things with other things, and because of these linkages, we don't allow ourselves to process emotion, right? But there are so many internal associations that we have emotionally that cause us to shut down the process of feeling emotion. You know, obviously, when we judge an emotion, we've already got a very negative viewpoint of having the emotion, right? So let's, whatever the emotion is, let's say this emotion is rage or hatred, right? Which we feel is a very negative emotion. So we judge the emotion. Now, in the process of judging the emotion, you're really just saying you shouldn't have it, aren't you? You're really just saying it shouldn't be there. But what's the truth? It's there. So can you see the problem with judgment is that you're basically telling yourself something shouldn't be there when it's already there. Now, if it's already there, is judging it going to release it? No. So having a negative viewpoint towards an emotion is not going to help its release. It's only going to cause you to lock it up even further. And the problem with locking it up even further is that it then defines the rest of your life. So in other words, you start acting upon the hatred. Right? That's worse, isn't it, than having it? If you're going to judge anything, judge the action upon the emotion rather than the emotion itself, right? If you're going to judge something, instead of judging having the emotion, you'd be far better off judging the fact that you've acted upon it. You follow? It's far better to not act upon an emotion and feel it than it is to not feel the emotion and act upon it. Right? But what I see many of you doing is judging the emotion, and then lo and behold, what happens? Situation gets triggered and hatred projected at somebody. Right? It's projected at somebody. So the poor person now is hated, feels hatred from you. If they're open to feeling the emotion, they'll absorb that. When the choice could have been to not judge it and therefore feel it, and if you felt it, then it wouldn't have been dumped on another person, which is the actual problem with that, having with the emotion. It's not having the emotion that's the problem. It's that what happens when you deny it, right? When you try to shut it down. That's what the problem really is from a love perspective. So can you see, every time you judge emotion, every time you're afraid of it or you judge an emotion, what you're doing by choice is you're now consigning yourself to the inevitability of acting upon it. It's inevitable. It's in you. And you've judged it, you're trying to shut it down. Now you're highly, I think it's inevitable that you will act upon it at some point in your future. Now, surely that's worse than actually noticing that it's there and feeling it. Now, again, the problem is these emotions that we judge, we have a linkage to our worth. So we go, okay, the fact that I've got hatred in me means that I am a bad person. No, it doesn't. You as a person, from God's perspective, were created perfect. So from God's perspective, having hatred in you is not so much the problem, because it can be released. It's just mud that's stuck on you. And you can always have a wash. But many of you choose to not have a wash and wash the mud off. And instead you say, now this mud is who I am. It helps you identify, you even oftentimes identify yourself with that mud. So people even become proud of the fact that they hate somebody. Now they've reinforced their identity as a part of that. That hatred is now a part of their identity even. So giving up the hatred means giving up themselves, is what they feel. And we've got to make sure we separate from who we are, our worth, who we are, our condition, from the actual emotion being present within ourselves. This is one of your secrets to addressing emotion. If you can see that every emotion you have inside of yourself got there through some choice, either yours, many times yours, or someone else's, it got there, and since it got there and before wasn't there, it can also leave there. It can also be released from there. If you understand that particular basic truth, then you can see that having an emotion doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means it's what you choose to do with that emotion that will cause you to become a more sinful person or not. Right? Now, you could choose to feel it and release it, and God would be overjoyed if that's what you chose to do. Or you can choose to suppress it and judge it or agree with it and keep it. And that is going to be detrimental to your future life. Right? You can make one or the other of those two choices. So what I'm suggesting to you, Lorleen, every time you judge a hatred that's inside of you, right, you're basically saying that you're now forcing that hatred to remain within you, and as a result, you are now inevitably going to act upon that hatred at some point in your future. Now, from God's perspective, that's worse than having the hatred inside of you and then choosing to release it. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, second half.
I think you've answered it, but I was going to ask that if I have that hatred in me, trying to get away from it has caused the facade to be nice. So if that is all facade, then...
So you're now also worried that some of the nice parts of you are not nice at all, and it's all just a facade to cover over the fact that you feel really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And isn't worry fear? And what do we do with fear? Is it real? Is that necessarily going to be true? You're just afraid of it being true, right? So you're allowed to feel your fear and still think it might be true, but still go ahead with the action of feeling the emotion. You follow? You're using that as an excuse to not feel the hatred. You're worried that if you feel the hatred, that it's going to mean that you are actually a very hateful person and you're a terrible person. And as I've just explained to you, the truth is your hatred is not connected with your worth, but you have connected it with your worth. So you now believe that if you have hatred, that it also means your worth is lower, right, from God's perspective, which is not true. It's just an emotion you have that you need to release. And the other problem is that because you've made it a part of your worth is a part of your true nature, and so you then now think it's a part of your true nature. Right? And I'm saying to you, no, have some confidence and faith in God, that in God's goodness, that God doesn't create anything that has hatred in it. The hatred got in there through some other means. Right? So have confidence in that, and you go, okay, the hatred got in there through some other means. It can be released through some other means, and in the end I can be without it. And it's not who I am. So your anger, your shame, your hatred, your fear, your terror, and many of the other emotions we could list, none of them are who you are. They are all emotions that either exist or do not exist within you, which is very, very different.
Thank you.
And you'll see that with clarity the more emotions you feel. Does that make sense? You will. It's like the more emotions you feel and process, the more you realise that your emotions are not who you are. They are, feelings that come and go. They pass through you, right? Now, some of them, if they're unloving and you allow them to pass through you, they will pass through you, and if you receive some God's love, they will never enter you again. But if you choose to do unloving actions, then negative emotions will enter you again. The law of compensation demands it. Right? And this is why it's very important later we discuss the laws and see what kind of relationship they have with our emotions.